This is a 7-slide preview of our 1-hour-long video called From a Baker's Tomb in Rome to a Virgin Mother in Bethlehem. We're hopeful this brief preview will encourage you to take the 1 hour to watch the entire slide presentation in order to gain a new appreciation for what actually happened in the first century and who Jesus and Mary Magdalene really were and what they really tried to do. Now, most of you will probably want to look this up in Wikipedia, and you're going to find that this tomb is dated to circa 20 to 50 BCE. And I have to say this is a dating that's probably favored by the Catholic Church. However, this dating was challenged in 1877, about 40 years after its discovery, by English archaeologist John Henry Parker. He specialized in ancient architecture, and in his book, The Archaeology of Rome, he offers compelling evidence that disputes the BCE dating. Our research, together with his information and other information, reveals that the tomb was actually constructed around 74. It was that year that 2 people died in the same year. One was a powerful freedwoman who was Vespasian's mistress. Her name was Antonia Caenus, and the other was a king whose story associates him with Jews and Christians. This image is from the 1st century, somewhere around 100, maybe a little before. And it is supposedly an image of the god Serapis, the Egyptian god Serapis. But here's something Emperor Hadrian complained about to his friend Servianus sometime around 134. He wrote, "Egypt, which you commended to me, my dearest Servianus, I have found to be wholly fickle and inconsistent, and continually wafted about by every breath of fame. The worshippers of Serapis are called Christians, and those who are devoted to the god Serapis call themselves bishops of Christ." And this image depicts what possibly was the confusion, because this is said to be Serapis, but note the crown of thorns. This could also be an image of Jesus the Nazarene. Now, there's a story in the Old Testament that not a lot of people know well, but it's the story of Joseph, who was born a prince. In fact, his father was the man whose name was changed to Israel to become the House of Israel. Joseph was the only one of 12 brothers who was called Nazar, which means prince. He was wrongfully enslaved, but later freed, which means he became a freedman. And in fact, he gained his freedom because he was able to interpret dreams. What gained him his freedom was that he interpreted Pharaoh's dream. But a more important dream was the dream of the chief baker, who dreamed that there were 3 baskets on his head, and in the basket most high was baked food for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating the bread out of the basket on his head. So when we see this image of Serapis, which also has a crown of thorns, we can also see in the basket on his head something pertaining to this dream that the chief baker had at Genesis 40, 16 and 17. Now, something most people don't know is that in the 1st century, Claudius built an east gate that was very similar in appearance to the east gate at Jerusalem. And at this time, Claudius was being served by, some say directed by, his powerful freedmen, Narcissus and Pallas. Now, in the right foreground in this picture of the Porta Maggiore is the baker's tomb, which was constructed to hold the remains of a freedman and his wife. Now, it's worth noting here that Narcissus was the name of a mythological god, and Pallas is better known as Homer's Pallas Athena, a goddess who often disguised herself as a man. Now, about 400 years after Claudius built the Porta Maggiore, Emperor Honorius, who was a devout Nicene Christian, constructed this massive structure over Claudius's Porta Major and over the baker's tomb. And Honorius's gate was also called the Porta Major, which means Great Gate. Now, about 400 years after Claudius built the Honorius's gate served as Rome's East Gate until 1838 when, strangely, Pope Gregory XVI ordered that it be demolished. The following year, Pope Gregory wrote an apostolic letter forbidding the faithful to participate in the Atlantic slave trade. He wrote, "We have judged that it belonged to our pastoral solicitude to exert ourselves to turn away the faithful from the inhuman slave trade in Negroes and all other men. Desiring to remove such a shame from all the Christian nations, we warn and adjure earnestly in the Lord, faithful Christians of every condition, that no one in the future dare to reduce to servitude or lend aid and favor to those who give themselves up to these practices, or exercise that inhuman traffic by which the blacks, as if they were not men but rather animals, having been brought into servitude in no matter what way, are, without any distinction, in contempt of the rights of justice and humanity." 22 years later, following the election of Abraham Lincoln, Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter. America's Civil War had begun. It lasted 4 years, 3 weeks, and 6 days, and more than 700,000 Americans died. But finally, slavery in the United States was abolished. Beneath Honorius's gate, buried for more than 1,400 years, uncovered by Pope Gregory, the enemy of slavery and defender of slaves, was the original Porta Major. More important, the monument to honor bread, Hebrew Lahem, was also uncovered. The Hebrew consonants, LHM, can also be rendered Elohim, and those words are translated Ella the Mother. She was the Nazarenes' great mother goddess, queen. Jesus said, "In everything then do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the essence of the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the way that leads to life, and only a few find it." The wide gate in the Porta Major is the only way horses and chariots could exit Rome on their way to destroy their enemies. But only a peaceful negotiator could exit through the small gate and the gate made narrow by the tomb. Also, the small gate and the narrow gate forced the entrance to acknowledge the presence of the monument to Ella the Mother. Perhaps, like me, they would look at that structure and say, "What in Jesus' name is that thing doing here?"